Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this session on the keys to successfully navigating a career in industry. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this session, Dr. Beth Lorsbach. She currently is the leader of the SMDD, or the Small Molecule Discovery and Development Group at Corteva Agriscience. And in that role, she holds a number of responsibilities, technical and non-technical. So she provides the technical, personnel, and organizational management of the chemistry functional groups. And the focus of the group is to discover, design, deliver, and implement new technology for current pipeline active ingredients, as well as active ingredients that are currently being manufactured. With regards to her biographical information, Dr. Lorsbach received her undergraduate degrees at Boston University, and then followed it up with a PhD in organic chemistry from the University of California, Davis. And over the course of her academic and professional career, she has been a highly prolific author, authoring a number of patents, 94 patent applications, as well as 25 external peer-reviewed publications and 29 conference presentations. And in terms of awards that she has received for this work, she was recognized in 2009 as a finalist for Indianapolis Best and Brightest Award. And from the ACS, she received the 2015 Rising Star Award. And as a sort of culmination, was named a 2019 ACS Fellow. And the ACS Fellow is a prestigious award that recognizes not only volunteering work to the ACS, but also high achievements in professional career. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Beth.
Excellent. Thanks, Abdallah, for that really kind and generous introduction. And thanks everyone for spending the next hour having a conversation. And that's hopefully what this will be. I have a couple slides, and just as sort of spurring thoughts on the discussion. And just kind of give a little bit of background in my career. I think Abdallah really did a great job. I'll just hit a couple highlights. And then I've got a couple vignettes around what I am calling sort of my sort of career best, or some of the things that really helped me shape me as a sort of formative technical researcher, and then sort of leadership skills. And then I'll have sort of my 10 keys to success, and then follow up with a recent article that I saw on LinkedIn around asking, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? And I'll have some thoughts there. So I'm not going to belabor this too much. Abdallah kind of went through that just to really sort of point out, I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so way up north. And as Abdallah mentioned, I went coast to coast. So I went to Boston. I swore when I was 18, I would never move back to the Midwest. And so what your 18-year-old self, and we'll talk about that later, doesn't know is actually quite a lot. And so I moved to Boston University, and then UC Davis, coast to coast, and then joined at the time Agriscience in '99 and discovery chemistry, a wide range of different projects, people leadership, and then in 2012 moved to, at the time, the process chemistry group and access to products. And then in 2016 moved back to lead the discovery chemistry, and then most recently both of my passions have come together in the process chemistry and discovery chemistry groups to lead the global small molecule and discovery and development team. So that kind of me in a nutshell. And now we'll move on to more exciting things to talk about, which are some of the career sort of vignettes. And before I get into that, I just want to sort of set the stage for how we do discovery and sort of the process. And so, we have our hit generation, lead generation, activities, and as we move forward, and many of you I think are familiar with how pharmaceuticals and drug design is sort of accomplished, and it's very, very similar in agrochemical discovery, and it's really sort of sobering to realize how many years it takes to get a molecule to the market. And so, on average, 12 years to get from that active, that initial spark of activity to something in the farmer's hands. So quite a long time and a significant amount of investment. So that time and then the investment to develop a new molecule is just under $300 million. So really, the more we can have information to sort of de-risk what goes into these sort of hits and actives and leads, the better. So how do we do that? Well, at Corteva, we have a portfolio of approaches. We have natural products, bioactive hypothesis, and competitive inspired, and these are sort of our inputs that go into our screens. And it really is hypothesis-driven research. It's very iterative, very collaborative, forming different hypotheses to really take the hits, actives, and leads to eventually get them to process chemistry that then we can deliver that active molecule into an actual product. And again, it takes time, right? And it's on average, 1,000 compounds to 6,000 compounds that are synthesized in any one project. And we really like to say, hey, molecules are discovered. They're not discovered. They're built, right? So it's not panning for gold. It's not a sieve or a filter. There's a lot of iteration and hypothesis testing before you get to that molecule, and sometimes you have to take steps back before you find the right molecule. And again, I'll have a vignette that sort of highlights that process, and that's shown here. And so this was a project that I worked on, the aminopyrimidines, and it started with CA811. And this was a molecule that came through our screens. A biologist had done a retrospective. We had very recently changed our screening profile to add some new pathogens into our broad spectrum fungicide screening. And this molecule came up and had really great activity from a one-day protectant standpoint on some key rust species. And it looked pretty attractive from a synthetic standpoint. And one of my colleagues, Zoltan Benko, recognized that he could really exploit this molecule through a parallel synthesis library. There are 3 points of diversity. You can see, substitution off the amine here. Asking the question, does the cyclohexyl ring have to be important into the biological activity? And then obviously the thiol substitutions. And when he did this, he actually made several different plates, surveying this structure-activity relationship, and identified CA217. And this now had really, really attractive wheat leaf blotch, which is a really key fungal pathogen, and really was a sort of a spectrum change from C811. And that's where I sort of got involved in the project to really take this CA217 to the next level, and really put together a synthetic strategy to exploit this. And I think what are key messages here are really trying to be broad and with your plans, because you never know when you may need a backup molecule, and I'll have more to say about that in subsequent slides. And so we made, over 1,500 compounds, and really, we're very, very fortunate to find a molecule, CA1, which, I can't show you exactly the structure, but had really great activity across multiple trials. And so if you look at here, this is % disease control. So the smaller the bar, the better, at a variety of different rates, 75 grams per hectare, 150, and 300 grams per hectare. So you can see the original lead, CA217, and the new molecule, CA1, versus some commercial standards. So really, really tremendous activity. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So this was CA1 at 75 grams per hectare versus the untreated. And you can see that, all this brown in the wheat leaf is the fungus, and was really devastating this wheat crop. So really, really tremendous activity. And this was the first sort of formative lesson I received and learned, and that is, celebrate your successes because they can be short-lived. And it was at this point that we ran into some challenges with this molecule. And it really was that, there was a key metabolite that was identified and that we found. And because of that metabolite, we could not move forward with CA1. And so that, allowed me and the team to take a step back and really start to ask questions. Well, this is a new mode of action. This is really valuable for the market, for the farmer and the grower. Is there any potential for us to identify a backup molecule for CA1 that would eliminate this metabolite? So we went back and looked at, remember those 1,500 compounds that I said that we had made during our sort of structure activity surveying of the initial lead. We went back to that pool of compounds and said, hey, are there any other analogs that could be useful? And we identified 3, and we took those out to the field and compared them to CA1 as well as some commercial standards. And we're very, very pleased that both backup 1 and 2 had a really comparable activity to CA1. Again, a picture is really exciting here. You've got backup 1, a little bit higher rate, untreated disease pressure is not as high as in the previous photo, but again, really exciting, to see that and to realize sort of that, while you face sort of a setback with the first molecule, you're able to come back and overcome it. And so just, some key thoughts here, on how we did this. And that's, sort of, the first sort of message I would say for, how to navigate a successful career in industry or in academics for that matter. And that's really to really fine tune those key technical hypotheses, take some risks. Certainly, it would have been pretty easy for us to just, stop when we got the sort of news around CA1, but we kept pushing forward and said, hey, we can solve this problem. And then really making sure that you're communicating to stakeholders and understanding, hey, there is potential here and painting that picture. So first vignette on, sort of the lessons that as a project leader and so forth. And very, very rewarding. This was, sort of research that was highlighted as that Rising Star Award that Abdallah mentioned. And really, when I look back at this, and it's been several years now, when I look back at that team, and there's some folks in blue, Zoltan, I mentioned, Jeff Epp, and then my co-leader, John Owen, who was the biologist on the project. It's the team and the people in the project that I remember, even many years later. Obviously, we had some pretty good successes, but the excitement around the project and the team members was really what I remember about the project for sure. So, as I mentioned, in 2012, I moved over from discovery chemistry to process chemistry. And at the time, process, we were in a rebuilding, standpoint. We were trying to rebrand, especially synthesis at the time, which is a very different purpose to process chemistry. And so, I had the fortunate, the fortune to be able to really grow as a leader and sort of define some of the processes as, how we were going to attract talent using campus hires and really focus on diversity and inclusion. And I think, we were able to really grow the visibility and the reputation of that group internally and externally. And then we still continue to do that today. And again, it's the people. And, again, I was, fortunate to be recognized for leadership and this, for driving this team. And this was one of the team items that we went to on from bowling. And, I think, for me as a leader, I grew tremendously, not by, having to rely on sort of the experts within the team, but then while also driving science and innovation. through others. And it's always that the people that make it worthwhile. And so, my passion and focus has always been, sort of leading that science through others and hopefully, connecting dots and helping, align their passions with that critical business directions. So a couple, sort of examples of, sort of vignettes that have shaped me. And now I'd like to get into sort of, my sort of philosophy, if you will, on again how to take these and how to apply some of these learnings for you all and really maybe spur some of the discussions. And that's really, first and foremost, continued professional development. I think, with all of these, my career path and goals, I've always grown. I've always, felt like I need to add, things to my plate, things to what I do every year that allows that to me to grow and to be challenged. And so I would encourage that whatever you do, you're always thinking about, things that you can contribute today to your personal growth, but then also looking forward to how do you continue to expand and really challenge yourself and realize that those new experiences always shape our thinking, and not to be afraid to take on those new opportunities because they do lead to growth and ways to look at things. So with that, some key thoughts, and so these are my 10, sort of ideas around how to be successful. And they're not rocket science. They're probably things that you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. First and foremost, within, I think, certainly Corteva, I would say in any industrial setting, it's a very collaborative environment, teamwork. So you can't be an island. You got to be, networking, talking to different people, communicating, especially results, good results and bad results, right? So in the case of CA1, when we had sort of a setback, we had to get out there and communicate that as frequently and often as possible so that everybody was on the same page. You can't sort of hold that in. So teamwork and making sure that you're networking. Communication is on there too. I'll get to that too in a second. Decision making. So we make a lot of decisions, and some of them are tough, right? Some of them are best for the project, best for the company. And as scientists, sometimes we get bogged down in like, oh, if I just make one more compound, do one more experiment, and sometimes those are tough calls to make. But the more we can make those as scientists and leaders, the better. Multidiscipline, and this is definitely true even now, even more than it was, when I first started 22 years ago. And that is multidiscipline. You have to understand, areas outside your own core research. So synthetic organic chemist, I have to be able to have conversations with biochemists, formulation scientists, process chemists, engineers, formulation scientists, et cetera. So you have to continue to learn. I find that really exciting. That's that growth. That's that personal development. And so, absolute critical for navigating a career in industry. Communication skills, being able to distill, sort of down, data. Again, you're talking to sometimes people that don't have, an in-depth scientific background. So you have to be able to distill down data that says, hey, this is why we should continue, or this is why we should stop. Realize that, email is not maybe the best form of communication. I think there's studies that say you have to communicate something 7 times before it becomes internalized. And so different people have different ways of communicating. They have different preferred ways of communicating. Certainly COVID over the last year or so has really taught us different ways of communicating via Zoom and so forth. Whereas, in the past, we maybe just be able to go down and walk to somebody's office. So being able to communicate, understanding different ways to communicate is really important. Interpersonal skills. So certainly we all have different styles. And you see the sort of the cartoon here. Understanding people's styles, understanding what motivates them. I know that if I go into somebody's office and they're very, very process oriented or data driven, I'm gonna spend a little bit more time going through the data with them versus somebody who's like, I just cut to the chase. Tell me what the answer is. And so you have to, again, through your networking, through understanding folks, understand how to shift and flex your style to maybe accommodate somebody else. And that only helps, from an overall success standpoint, eliminates frustration on your part as well as others. Motivated. So yeah, this is something that I think is really, really key. If you don't fundamentally believe that your project will be successful, it won't be successful. So you have to believe that what you're doing is going to work, without putting blinders on, right, to the point of decision making. But if you're sensing that it's not going to work, then it's best to stop it. But if you're really sort of all in, if you will, and certainly we were, on the perimeter team. There's not much that a highly motivated team of sort of driven scientists can accomplish. Cultivate smart friends. So this may sound sort of a little bit sort of silly, but in all seriousness, one of the things that I tell people who are interviewing or colleagues when I go out, and one of I think the best parts of Corteva is I am surrounded by incredibly smart, talented people that I learn from every day, and to me that's really exciting. It's motivating. It helps me become certainly a better leader, scientist. It really can hone that critical thinking that's important. And so cultivate smart friends is really, really, really important. Question dogma. So this is really key, especially in industry. Don't accept because that's how we've always done it. That's something that's always sort of true, and certainly as Corteva has been growing as a new company and bringing together three companies, if you will, from Agriscience, DuPont, and Pioneer. That has been something that I think we can continue to do and should make sure we're doing. Certainly within our new team, we'll be sort of asking that question as well. Just because we've done it before doesn't mean it's the right thing to continue to do. Opportunities. I'm gonna have more to say about this in the next slide too. Opportunities. Be willing to take those responsibilities that may be a little bit outside your comfort zone. Maybe challenge yourself a little bit, grow your skills. Maybe you're a little nervous on, am I ready yet? Really understand that those opportunities can really drive that personal growth, that professional growth that keeps you again continuing to learn as well. And then the last one is be your own best advocate, right? Squeaky wheel gets the oil. Create your own success. Don't be swayed by well, Beth did it this way, so I have to do it that way, or person X does it this way. Chart your own path. Your career is just that. It's your career, and really nobody's going to care about it more than you. And so be your own best advocate. Tell people what you're doing. Not tooting your horn, but saying, hey, I'm curious if I'd like to tell you about some things I've been thinking about, or what have you. But and then if you want something, ask for it, right? Contrary to popular belief, leaders are not mind readers, right? So sometimes you have to hit us over the head a little bit. So be your own best advocate. And that kind of goes into sort of the next sort of slide. And this was this recent article that I saw on LinkedIn, and it was asking a lot of different business folks around what advice they would give their 20-year-old selves, and that's sort of the same lesson came up again and again, and that's action beats deliberation. And that really resonated with me, and many of the people on the call will know that I definitely have a bias for action, but it was more than that to me. And it's just this notion that, if you're waiting for, and I think the guy from Higher Proof, Max, if you're waiting for the perfect role or the perfect job, you're going to be planning too much, right? So, take that opportunity, take that, that next role and learn from it, grow. And if it's not exactly what you want, then be looking for that next opportunity as well. And again, being your own best advocate. But don't wait, again, that bias, and certainly don't wait for somebody to come to you and say, hey, I have this opportunity. I think that's also something that we do, and maybe as women we do that a little bit more. I'm going to wait till they come and ask me to do that. No, don't wait. Ask for something. Jump at the chance. Be willing to make mistakes. I've made numerous ones, probably even several already today. So keep learning. Don't be afraid to to get in there and make some mistakes, but keep learning and learn from those mistakes. Number one, believe in yourself, and this is definitely, I think, something that we all should continue to do. Don't be afraid to explore new opportunities and continue testing and asking asking those questions. Well, what can I do next? And I know Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder, is famous for this bias for action and so forth, but it's also outside of sort of just business and industry and so forth, that many artists practice their art, right? And they do things over and over and over again, and sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. So again, action and practice beats study and deliberation, and so just encourage you to not be afraid to jump in. And then I'll leave you with one thought, and then certainly let's have a dialogue and a discussion that from Steve Jobs, and I'm a big Apple supporter, and really this I think this is absolutely true. The only way we do great work is to love what you do. And so if you don't love what you're doing, find that passion, because the more passionate you are at something, the more competent you are, and there's a need, there's not much you won't be able to accomplish. So with that, I'll pause and sort of answer any questions you may have.
All right. Well, thank you, Beth, for a wonderful talk and very didactic information provided there. I'm sure any member of the audience can certainly find something that they can start applying to their day-to-day lives and professional lives in general. Okay, so with that said, we are moving towards, as you've said, a discussion sort of format. There were a few questions that came into the chat over the course of the talk. So I'll just start with Shree's question. She asked, what are some strategies to present yourself as a best prospective candidate with limited experience in industry, apart from focusing on transferable skills?
Yeah, this is a really great question, Sri. I think giving examples of how you've handle diversity, conflict, decision making. I think those can all be really transferable. And so I would look for ways to highlight some of those. If you're on an interview, for sure. I think those will go a long way for in addition to sort of obviously technical. Technical, depth and training for sure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that answer, and thank you, Shri, for the question. Another question that came through Huva is, what is one important thing that professionals in industry look forward to in a candidate while hiring?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I think first and foremost, industry, especially and I should say within R&D, which is where I'm based and where we're recruiting from. You have to have sort of that baseline technical knowledge. So that first and foremost has to be met. And then on top of that, then it's some of the things that I've sort of talked about. How much problem solving, how much ability to navigate adversity has somebody had in either their research or and overcome that. How what's their sort of decision making, and typically we use past behaviors, right? Sort of past examples to sort of predict how somebody is gonna behave in the future. And so I would look for really first and foremost highlighting all your technical sort of depth of knowledge, but then looking for ways to showcase some of those decision makings, that sort of risk taking, areas where you maybe have moved a project into a different area that maybe wasn't clear at the time. Those would be the things that I think would really set you apart.
Okay, excellent. Along the same vein, somebody asked whether, having said all of those attributes you're looking for, would you recommend or have you done yourself formal leadership training to get you to that level?
Yeah, really great question. So, we're very fortunate that, through Heritage, Dow, Agrisciences, and now Corteva, I've had a lot of sort of internal training, leadership training, as well as sort of external programs. I will say that the ACS actually offers a lot of leadership training that if you don't have access through an organization like I do, through Corteva. But I would really highly recommend, looking at some of those leadership trainings through the ACS. I've taken those classes as well, and they're very good. You always learn something new. And I've taken a lot of different training, Corn Ferry, and different like leadership training. So would recommend it, and check out the ACS ones as well if again you don't have the opportunity through your company.
Yes, I would definitely second the ACS recommendation as well, having undergone some of that training myself. And before we finish this session, I'll be sure to try to find a link and post it here so that you guys can check it out and sign up for some of those trainings. They are typically free for ACS members, so there will be opportunities for you to undergo those trainings as well. Yeah, okay, so there's another question that came in from Shri again. She asks, do you have any tips on how to navigate through questions about one's weaknesses during an interview?
Yeah, good question. I think we all have weaknesses. I'd like to call them gaps, not weaknesses. I think what you want to showcase in the interview again is that you're self-aware, that you understand, hey, yeah, this is maybe an area I'm working on, and without making it seem like it's maybe bigger than what it is, right? We all have them, and unless it's a critical flaw, I think focusing on, hey, this is something that's an area, that's a gap that I know it. I've heard my advisor tell me about it. I'm working on it, but it's not a limitation for me to interact or be successful or what have you. Sort of fill in that blank. So I think the key is articulating that you're aware and that you're working on it without sort of belaboring it. Yep, good questions.
Excellent, thank you for that answer. Somebody asks, as grad students, many of us do not have direct exposure to leading a group. In such a scenario, does volunteering leadership experiences count?
Yeah, really good question. Yeah, volunteering counts. I think, getting involved with, if you can mentor an undergraduate, if you've had any experience, sort of, helping out with the class, from a TA standpoint, might be harder as an undergrad. But any sort of, opportunity to demonstrate leadership, volunteering is great. ACSs or local sections are always looking for opportunities to get people involved. Those are ways to showcase your leadership for sure. And the key there is that you want to be able to highlight that you can handle multiple things at once, right? That you can juggle, different priorities and still manage to focus on what's important and getting things done and so forth. Good questions.
Yes, good questions. Thank you guys for asking. One thing I may add, as a former graduate student myself, there are opportunities typically at university level to join, graduate student groups, either graduate student groups that are already existing and potentially can use your leadership within a leadership role, or even groups that do not exist and would need to be founded by you and sort of maintained and with a culture being established. So those are also very good opportunities within the university environment to showcase leadership.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions in the chat. So actually, something just came in.
Okay, great.
Somebody said you mentioned needing to communicate to people in different fields. For new professionals, any advice for learning new scientific areas while still learning about your own area?
Yeah, great question. And that sometimes is a challenge, right? Because you're new to, especially if you're coming to industry, you're new to the field, you're trying to ramp up on chemistry, and at least in my case, I was trying to ramp up on chemistry. I was trying to, learn about, the different areas, a lot of times you're doing, chemistry that you've never done before. So, but, you have to prioritize that. And so it's kind of, certainly a hard thing to do. I think different companies do it different ways. We try to make sure we put people on projects so that the chemistry is maybe a little bit more straightforward so they can have that opportunity to grow and learn. But what I found is, for me, that worked is really to build partnerships. Again, that surround yourself with smart people. And, I had to surround myself with a lot of key biologists so that I could, sort of learn and ramp up on the biology. And they were key mentors for me throughout my career, and actually are still mentors to this day. So I think finding those people that you can kind of ask those questions to, that that allow you to sort of show your vulnerability, that, hey, I don't know this, and I really do need to know this. So I think finding those people that you can sort of be open to, and not being afraid to ask, especially your first year. I mean, that's the time, the first couple of years, that's the time when you can ask anything, right? There's no such thing as a stupid question.
All right, thank you for the answer. And in general, just thank you for being able to relate all of these questions that are coming into some of these principles you laid out in your talk. So the clear connection being made here to, networking and finding advocates outside of your own area to help you sort of ramp up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's move to Mike Tutland asked a question. Beth, with only so many groups and so many people to lead at any institutions, how do you set yourself apart from other potential leaders? What is the typical timeline that these opportunities present themselves?
Good question, Mike. I think, I think, so I think first and foremost, you've got to raise your hand, right? And then you sort of have to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm interested in this. And then the tough part comes, at least from my experiences, and then you kind of have to listen to, okay, I want to be the leader of this group, right? And then you kind of have to listen to what the gap is. Give you sort of a really, gross analogy. So like, I'm a huge Green Bay Packer fan, right? Many people know that. I am convinced, absolutely 100% convinced, that I would be a fantastic head coach. I'm absolutely convinced of it. I have absolutely done nothing to develop myself for that opportunity and for that role. But I know I would be great. I would certainly be better than some of the coaches that we currently have. But that's a different topic for a different day. But you kind of see where I'm going. So you, first and foremost, you have to raise your hand. Second of all, you have to understand what the gaps are, perceived or real, right? Because sometimes there are perceived gaps that we all have to address. And then you gotta be willing to do the sort of heavy lifting to work towards those gaps. But first and foremost, you got to ask for it. I hope that answered the question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
I believe Mike and I are both Chicago Bears fans, so I think we would be very afraid of you being a Green Bay coach, because it might widen the gap between our teams. So,
or maybe narrow them a little bit.
maybe. All right. So, oh yes, he mentioned being a Bears fan, indeed. So she has also a question, and this is a follow-up to what we were talking about volunteering as a exemplar of leadership. She is asking, what is the best way to highlight that within the CV, especially if you may have like spatial restrictions within the CV?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's been a while since I've updated my CV. I guess I would, maybe, go online and look up different examples. Not quite sure where I would put it. From a volunteer standpoint, I think I would encourage that I think resumes tend to be one page, CVs can be longer. So I wouldn't be deterred by having a longer CV. And I guess I'd put it towards sort of that end of your work experience. So you have your education set up, and then your sort of work experience. I don't know, anybody, Abdallah, anybody else have thoughts on where you would put that from a CV standpoint?
I completely agree. As you said, CV can be a little bit longer, so you can definitely go in there. But then just as you said, I think highlighting sort of technical aspects of what are the attributes you're getting out of volunteering. So if you're finding some leadership opportunities, being able to highlight using the appropriate verbiage in terms of communicating those transferable skills you've learned through the volunteering experience could go a long way. So it's not only about letting people know what experiences you have, but what are the potential transferable skills you've learned from them, and being able to highlight them again with the appropriate verbiage in your CV.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the steady stream of questions. It's been quite productive discussion so far.
It's great.
So we don't have anything in the chat at this moment, so I would invite people to potentially come off mute and be able to ask your questions in that way as well. In the meantime, let me just highlight, I put in the chat for the Zoom that I've posted the ACS leadership opportunities. And so if you were to go to that link on the on the left-hand side of the page, you have ACS Leadership Development System. And underneath that, you have a link to add a course, attend a course. So that will give you options to take a look at all of the courses that are available, and then maybe enroll. In some cases, I think they've transferred them to sort of a virtual learning system, so that enables you to be able to absorb the content at your own pace and in a way that's reasonably more interactive than normal. The other option, the Leadership Institute, is a little bit more restricted, and typically those tend to be limited to members who are leaders within their respective local sections. So the local section that is most relevant to the Predict is the Indiana local section. And so if you ever want an opportunity to undergo the Leadership Institute, going through the local section would be the most successful way to do that.
Yep. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
All right, do we have any more questions from the audience? Or Mohammed or Jay, do we see anything on the Hoover platform that hasn't been migrated into Zoom?
Hey, Abdallah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so as this session was going on, Zoom has done something where both Jade and I both don't have access to any of the buttons like chat or record, or even to leave the meeting and restart it. So we can hear you, and apparently we can speak, but we don't have the kind of ability to look around, unfortunately.
It's okay. We do have a couple of questions that came in, so I can just go through those.
Okay, great. I will say I don't think participants can unmute themselves because this is a.
Interesting. Okay, great to know. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, so if you have a question, I encourage you to put it in the chat. So one of the questions that came in is, if you could start your career over, would you change anything about your path?
Good question. I think the only thing that I would change is and part of it was just the sort of setup. I spent a lot of time in discovery, probably 10, 15 years early on, which is great. Love discovery, but I would have maybe challenged myself a little bit to take that risk and do something different, with the notion that it was always going to help me in the future and whatever I would do. So I guess I would have maybe practiced what I'm preaching here and taken a risk a little bit sooner. Yep.
And that's great. Actually, that leads us nicely into Grace's question. She's asking, how did you navigate moving from the lab to a more leadership-focused position? And how did you make that transition? And when did you know it was the right time to make that transition?
Really good questions, Grace. So I think, I guess I have to give a little bit of context, the way Agriscience and Corteva is sort of organized. We have a sort of scientific track and a leader manager track. And, I tried and stayed on the scientific track as long as I possibly could. And that's just, from my passion to be able to sort of still be involved in the science. And so even as I was a project leader and a people leader, was still on that sort of scientific track. It probably wasn't until 2015 that sort of I had to make a choice. And it really was for me the realization of that sort of, ability to reach more people and have more influence. Sort of that exponential influence. If you look up the 4 stages of contribution, and you can kind of Google that for me, where I was getting a lot of satisfaction was connecting people and getting that sort of, again, leading the science through others as opposed to me myself sort of doing it with my own hands. And so it was in 2015 that I said, okay, I can have a broader influence. I can reach more people if I go onto sort of that manager track. But I made it clear that it was always going to be an R&D, and that I did not have any aspirations to leave R&D. Again, because of that connection to the science.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for this answer. So, and Grace is also grateful of your answer as well.
Good to hear from you.
We have come to the end of our session. I want to once again take the time to thank our speaker, Beth Lorsbach, for a very wonderful presentation. Once again, I think a lot of people will take quite a lot of good from it and be able to apply it productively in their professional lives going forward. And for the rest of the audience, I want to thank you for your active engagement and your participation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Predict Symposium.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Val. Thanks, everyone.